Welcome to Canusa Street, a podcast at the intersection of the issues and policies between Canada and the United States. Here are your hosts, Beth Burke and Chris Sands.
Hello, and welcome back to Canusa Street. I'm Beth Burke with the Canadian American Business Council, joined by my fabulous, amazing co-host, Christopher Sands of the Woodrow Wilson Center. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Hi, Beth. I'm feeling like I haven't deserved that praise in quite a long time, but I'll take it.
Oh, you are always wonderful in my book. We are excited. We have a great episode in store today. We have a friend of ours, a friend of the relationship. I'm going to kick it to Chris to do a proper introduction.
Well, this is a pleasure because it's a chance to introduce to our listeners the Honorable Lisa Raitt, who's been on the podcast once before when we talked about the Ambassador Bridge, but of course, there's a lot of water under that bridge since, so we'll pick up a new topic. She is Vice Chair for Global Investment Banking at CIBC, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. Now, she joined CIBC Capital Markets in January 2020, having previously worked in both the public and the private sectors. Her current focus is on senior client coverage and business development with clients in the energy, infrastructure, and industrial sectors, which align very closely with her expertise. Now, prior to her current role, Lisa Raitt was the president and CEO of the Toronto Port Authority. She was elected to the House of Commons in 2008, where she went on to hold 3 senior cabinet portfolios, serving as Minister of Natural Resources, Minister of Labor, and Minister of Transport. Most recently, she was the deputy leader of the official opposition and a deputy leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. She has a Bachelor of Science degree from St. Francis Xavier University and a Master's in Chemistry from the University of Guelph. She has an LLB from Osgoode Hall Law School and was called the Ontario Bar in 1998, which is important. She's a lawyer. We have to be careful. And I'm pleased to say that she was named to the Woodrow Wilson Center's Global Fellow ranks at the Canada Institute in 2020, and I have been learning from her ever since. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you very much, Chris, going through my full bio.
Well, let me add on to it because she's also an esteemed member of the advisory board of the Canadian American Business Council. So we take advantage of her wealth of experience and understanding of the relationship often, which I hope we can dig into a little bit today.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe that's a good place for us to start. You know, the times have been evolving. The relationship has been evolving. What do you see as where things stand with Canada and the U.S. today?
So I would say that we've moved from being bewildered to a little bit aghast as to what's going on. It's the best way I can put it. I don't know if a lot of people in the States understand that mostly every professional person working in Canada in the service industry has had some connection to the United States in business. It's a relationship that's front and center with us almost every day of our working lives. Like I was thinking when you were talking about my past, that every role I've had, be it at the Port Authority or in government or here at CIBC, has relied upon relationships with the United States in order to move forward our commerce together. And I think that applies across Canada. So when it first started, the notion that we were going to have tariffs on our goods, we've seen that before. We've heard about that before. But some of the stuff that was being said about Canada being a freeloader and stuff, I mean, part of it could be true. There's always a kernel of truth, but the overall presentation of it was something that bewildered us, right? And now that we are in a situation where tariffs have been levied at the border, we're a bit aghast because I guess we're surprised that it actually happened. But I'm hoping that, quite frankly, Beth and Chris, that we move past those 2 emotions and into what our third emotion is going to be, which is resolute, which is we will dig in and we will try to find a way through this and come out better on the other side.
Yep. I think that's very well said. And, I think there's so many opportunities to come out better on the other side, for this relationship to continue to deepen and grow. And given your experience and portfolio, I think those are some key areas that Canada and the US could continue to do more collaboration on. What do you see as key opportunities for not just the growth and economic development, but like business and government partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, we have to get past what's happening right now, quite frankly. But the reality is that energy transition, which is still on the books for the entire world, you're going to need natural gas as a transition fuel, both in Canada and the United States. We have, as Danielle Smith will tell you, and I know you've both had Danielle Smith at your places, she'll tell you that Alberta has an infinite supply of natural gas. And that's kind of reassuring to know that you're going to have that natural gas available as the transition fuel as we move forward through to a carbon-free world, because we will get there eventually. So we're a great partner there, and we've got pipelines just crisscrossing our border and serving both of our countries very well, very safely. We have companies that work on both sides of the border. We've got families, Beth, that live on both sides of the borders. Like, we are linked by history, but we're linked by blood. I mean, I run into so many folks here in Toronto whose kids are working in the States. They're working in New York or and so many kids of my son's ages who have gone to school in the States and have decided to stay on. They marry somebody from the US. They have kids that hold both of our passports. I mean, this is a real linkage. And that's why we do have to work hard to get through. So build upon our personal relationships, first and foremost. Political relationships are there. They'll always be there. They're a bit tenuous, and they may change depending upon who's in power in Ottawa, who's in power in Washington. But the fundamentals are still there. And that's why, the work that you do and the work that Chris does is so important, because it's never been more important to me to know that I've got a place to go to understand the relationship and to be regrounded as to why the relationship is important and valuable and essential to the well-being of both countries. You guys are kind of you're the keeper of the flame, as we used to say in politics. You're the ones that are going to be able to explain why, although there are some ticked off people in Canada and there are some people who feel aggrieved in the United States at the current state of our relationship, the flame is there. It's really important. We've got to keep it going.
Yeah.
If I can pick up on that, Lisa, you're right to tease me about biographies. Mine always gets longer too, and you just wince. I long for my days of being young when my biography was quite short. But something that came with age is I find that if you're under 30 in Canada or the United States today, you don't have a memory of the way things were before free trade. And the way things were, my observation was that Canadians were nationalist, sometimes economically nationalist, a little instinctively distrustful of the U.S., worried about what we're going to do, whether we really understand Canada, whether we're going to, on purpose or accidentally damage the relationship. And there was, not to make too big a deal of it, but there was a certain amount of anti-Americanism in Canada, particularly people who, just didn't like the U.S. and all it represented. And that came from, obviously, the experience of the Vietnam War and civil rights, and there were a lot of critical views of the U.S. But free trade remarkably changed that. It changed it because the U.S. showed it was a partner that would help write rules and then follow those rules. And I've heard in recent while, more of the sort of, as you say, the kind of anxiety, the hope that we can get it back together. But, and I don't want to suggest Canadian Americanism is one of those things that'll lead to burning down the embassy or anything. It's not that extreme. But just that kind of sense that you can't trust the U.S. quite the same way. It struck me that that's a new experience for the millennials and Generation Z that are rising in policymaking and elsewhere. And I worry about that. I'm not fatalistic. I think it can be changed. But what's your view? Are you seeing the same in Canada? And what will the next generation think about the potential of a Canada-U.S. relationship going forward?
I don't see it yet.
That's good.
I don't see it yet. And I'll say that, and the reason being, it's because of how close we're intertwined on social media. What social media has done is it's opened each other's living rooms to each other. Like, you literally are in someone's kitchen watching them cook, and they could be in Nevada, but you're developing a relationship and you think you've got a friendship with them, right? People communicate with, and I'm talking about TikTok specifically or Instagram, people develop relationships that never would have happened because they never would have met in their entire lives. But thanks to the algorithm, we find ourselves in certain areas of this internet where we all agree on certain things, and you develop these kinds of relationships. And I think 30-somes I think that they identify with their brand, and they see themselves as being wherever they can work is where they want to be. So I don't see the anti-Americanism coming through. I really don't. I do see anti-Trump. And I don't think that's going to go away. But it's not blaming of the country. And quite frankly, I don't know how to put it. There are two moments of pride in the last couple of weeks for Canadians. One was during that hockey game when we won the Four Nations Cup.
Right.
I swear to God, guys, if we didn't win that cup, I was going to have to be in therapy for a while, because my entire personality is hinged upon whether or not we are able to beat the United States in big games of our game, hockey. So that was a big thing. But the second one that's getting a lot of play up here is what Mike Myers did on Saturday Night Live on the weekend. For those of you who watch, I'm still a big fan of Saturday Night, all things included. And he did a great impression of Elon Musk. I mean, scarily good impression. But then he also came out at the end when they do the goodbyes to the crowd, and he was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Canada's not for sale." And he kept gesturing to it, but he also did this motion where it's a hockey motion of elbows up, elbows up. We all know what that, again, it's back to hockey. God, I should get a better. But it was about fight back, Canada, take your stance. And we take our cues from people who are on both sides of the border and are sending the message back that, okay, we're all in this together. So I'm seeing not anti-Americanism, I'm seeing anti-Trump administration, for one, not rooted in any of the stuff that he's doing with respect to government efficiencies or what he's doing with respect to DEI. It's not rooted in that. It's more of a why are you picking on us kind of thing.
It's really humbling, I think, at least for me, watching this relationship, how even when the U.S. comes on aggressively, Canadians reach out instinctively and try to find a way to start the dialogue. I don't know we always deserve that, but for me, what makes this current crisis or the current moment challenging is that 9/11 was a challenge for us. We had different views on different sides of the border, and it took a while for us to get back to the same page. And COVID was tough because it splitted us apart and put us all on Zoom and all of that. But this isn't some third-party threat that's challenging us. This is really a conflict between us that we have to work our way through. And I think it makes it a lot harder to find that good place from which you can begin to work together. But I have to hand it to Canadians. You keep trying. You're the best friend we ever had, and we don't deserve you, I think. But anyway, Beth, over to you. That was my little editorial.
Well, I wasn't going to jump in on this, but I feel like I am the eternal optimist on this relationship. And so I feel like I have to sprinkle a little of that in here. I think, right, it's a tough time. And I think there's challenges in every relationship. And I think we can look at this, as tough as it may be, as opportunities for us to recalibrate the relationship in ways that work. In so many ways, it's such a strong partnership, and we're so integrated, and we rely on each other, and we share all these values. But I think every now and again, it's good to have a gut check of how do we go? Where do we go from here? And I think, sort of to what you were speaking to earlier, Lisa, is this idea of so many different areas of opportunity: energy, critical minerals, economic supply chain integration, innovation. Like, we do so much innovating collaboratively. And I think these are spaces that we need to find a way to get back to that conversation. So I'm with you. This is really tough, and we need to clear through the situation that we're in. But I'm eternally looking for the guiding light to pull us out of it, if you will.
But we need people like you, Beth, because right now where people are focused is twofold. Number one, how do we retaliate in Canada to get the attention of the people to say to your president, please stop this? That's what these retaliatory tariffs are all about. Getting a market signal, getting governors talking about it. That's the full court press. The other side of it for politicians right now, putting on my former ministerial hat, we went through the Great Recession, is figuring out how to protect the homeland, not security-wise, I'm talking economically. So they've got to come up with their path in terms of what they're going to do. During the Great Recession, we were so fortunate to have the United States as our ally in dealing with it. And that made life a whole lot easier. But now we have to think about it on our own, which is not a bad thing. Frank McKenna, who is also a great friend of both your institutions, said we're on a burning platform and we've got to figure out how we're going to go forward economically. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But, another interesting factoid is, our Indigenous peoples are actually dual citizens. They are not only a citizen of Canada or the United States. They are recognized by an act of 1848, I think, of being original settlers, original land. They're not settlers, we're the settlers, but original peoples of the lands. And as such, they don't recognize that border. And there, again, is another example of where we need to get to. But we've got to go through a little bit of pain to get there on both of our sides.
Can I ask a little bit about something that we've all been talking about the last couple of years, and that is the remarkable job that the government did during the negotiation of what we now call CUSMA or the USMCA in leveraging data. I want to talk about the future. And by really looking at the data, Canada developed the ability to say to members of Congress and Senate, of course, that within the area you represent, this is how many jobs Canada creates. This is how much investment comes in. This is how much your district exports to Canada and then imports in return, et cetera. And there wasn't a big ask associated with that, but you had all the opposition parties, the premiers, everyone coming out and just saying, America, we're more important than you think we are to you. And this is why it matters for you. I guess I wonder, and it's a bit speculative, but Lisa Raitt, could that data be part of the answer? Because that was a snapshot. And if things begin to go and the tariffs are applied and we're starting to feel that pain, can that data be part of telling the story of the costs of a trade war, which I think can be abstract for the average person at their kitchen table? You can talk about it in dramatic terms, but it doesn't mean the same thing as actually bringing it close to home.
God, I hope so, Chris. I mean, your lips to God's ears kind of thing. But we do have, unfortunately, a big hurdle in this analysis that tariffs are bad for Americans. And that is the fact that yesterday, so we're March 4 today. Yesterday was March 30. And there was an announcement made that the Taiwanese semiconductor company is going to spend $100 billion developing and building manufacturing plants for semiconductors in the United States. And that's a proof point, I think, for Mr. Trump to point to say the CHIPS Act used a carrot to entice them. Nobody got anything built. I threatened tariffs, and look what happens. And I think that is a real hurdle for us to get over, because how long will it be until the United States citizens feel the pain of a retaliatory tariff? It could be a long time, guys, to be honest. We will feel it immediately in Canada because we're going to have auto plants shutting down. And whether or not that price pass-through makes it to the United States consumer's pocket, it's going to be a delayed reaction. But in the meantime, we're gonna have a period of time we have to go through. So data is important. Whether or not you can cut through Mr. Trump's very effective communication strategies to convince citizens to talk to their elected representatives that it's hurting them individually, I don't have a lot of optimism at the moment. And that's why I do have optimism for the relationship. I just think we're in a really tough time ahead. Like I was over in Australia recently. There was a Canada-Australia conference. And somebody said something so true. And he said, you're on an airplane and there's turbulence, but you can't get off. Like there's no option to get off. So you just kind of have to ride it out. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say, the delayed effect. I've been, reading all the articles and reports and all of the things that are being put out around how the impact's going to be felt. But, we all have spent time speaking with businesses, especially like thinking about autos, for example. Those are huge multi-year plannings, investments. And those decisions are being made. They were even being made before the announcement. Just the threat of the tariffs was enough to put some businesses in a place to scale back their investments, to change their staffing plans. And that, I think, could be felt sooner than some of the speculation is being said, because that is not opening a plant, not reinvesting in changing infrastructure or supporting, widgets or whatever it may be. I think that there will be some quick results and felt impact there. So I don't know. I mean, you're right. We're in a tough spot. We're in a rocky place. I just am so eternally hopeful that we can navigate a way through this, because to your point, we can't get off the plane. So yeah.
And cooler heads will prevail, I think. But I also would caution Canadian listeners that, look, oftentimes we think we understand and know the American political system. Beth, you are a veteran of it. You know it better than anybody else on this call. And we're trying to convince ourselves, it's only 2 years until the midterms. Listen, folks in Canada, we don't know anything about how American politics works. Really, we don't. So, take a back seat to the experts who will tell you what's happening with respect to the US, because maybe the midterms don't count. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe this is 4 years. Maybe this is 20 years. Telling ourselves timelines that we have no ability to predict, I think, is a wrong approach. I think we should just recognize and live in the moment of where we are, plan for the future, and just get on with trying to figure out how we're going to do it. Beth, a lot of stuff is talking about we got to diversify our trade. My God in heaven, we've been trying to diversify our trade for 250 years, and it hasn't really worked out. We've got a big consumer down to the south of us, and we rightfully pivoted to wanting to be able to be part of that relationship. So where we are right now is, I think we have to look internally to build up whatever it is we have to serve each other. And it's...
Yeah, you also raise an interesting point, which is Americans don't understand Canadian politics. So, understanding the dynamics that are also happening north of the border is something I'm spending a lot of time trying to do and explain to people. Is like, okay, there will be a new prime minister at the end of this week, but then what? I mean, there are all these other phases, and explaining that to to Americans is also very complicated, and understanding who the negotiating players are and understanding all of that. Yeah. There's been such a change in dynamic.
There is. And a lot of it has to do with the turmoil that we're in currently vis-a-vis the United States, because Canadians they're kind of bombarded right now. We are going to have a federal election. It's probably going to be in April or May. We will have a new standard bearer for the Liberal Party of Canada. Most likely it's going to be Mark Carney. We'll know on Sunday. We have Pierre Poilievre in the Conservative Party. We also have NDP, Jagmeet Singh, Elizabeth May, and the Bloc Québécois. So we've got a lot of parties going on. What will I predict, though? Here's my prediction. I don't know if it matters who is sitting in the chair of Prime Minister, because I think the options for Canada are pretty much the same. The strategy is going to be the same. The tactics may be different, but the strategy is the same, because we only have what we have. We've got north-south grids. We've got north-south highways, transportation links, rail. We also have auto sector. We also have resources. So there's only certain pieces on the table that can be moved, manipulated. How you do it is going to be the choice of the political party, but the effect is probably going to be the same.
I agree with that, although maybe I want to test a hypothesis with you a little bit. I feel like, and I know I've said this to you before, that the Canada-US relationship is a friendship between the Canadian-American people, and leaders come and they steward that well or badly, but at the core, we like each other. And you mentioned on social media the degree to which we sort of started a conversation there. And I was very struck by Doug Ford's Canada's Not for Sale hat, and you mentioned Mike Myers, this kind of way in which even the booing of national anthems got outside the Beltway media, maybe touched on the Wall Street Journal, but people were talking about it across the country because it got attention. Sometimes getting attention for Canada-US relations at the level of the average person is so essential, because that's where they start to think about Canada here in the US for a while. We have a big event coming up this year, and I don't mean the Canadian election or my birthday, but we're going to open the Gordie Howe International Bridge, and that's something you had a big, big role on. how, as we look for all of these things, and timing is one of the tricky things, but to what extent do you think, both practically but also symbolically, opening that bridge is a chance to sort of talk about what's good in the relationship? And I find that most of the young people have really very little sense of the history of the Canada-US relationship. But maybe this is part of building a bridge, literally, that will remind us of what we've done. And I know that you paid for 3/4 of the bridge up in Canada. And so that's, and I think it's too late for you to turn it into a drawbridge that you could pull up in Anchor, but maybe not. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but yeah. How do we open a bridge? How do we have a party when the mood's like this?
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. It's finally opening, isn't it? That's a great question. And it should be a day of joy, because it was the ultimate collaboration between two governments two. It was like several governments, because not only were the states and the municipalities involved, but it was over like 25 years of trying to get this link built. It's been a big part of my career as well. It started at the port and ended with me as Minister of Transport. But the reality is that I don't know what the temperature is going to be at the time. Maybe that's a great opportunity. I think I'm more concerned about what the heck happens to the G7 that's happening in Alberta in June and what that looks like. I'm worried about a whole bunch of things, guys, these days. But in terms of the Gordie Howe Bridge, I agree with you, Chris, and your ever eternal sunshiny view of the world, that this is a great opportunity for various political leaders to come together and recognize in a nonpartisan, bipartisan, cross-partisan way that this was a really good thing. And I'm glad that we took the decisions together, and here it is. And by the way, we really hope that there's enough trade to pay for it, because it was precipitated on the notion of a certain amount of trade going through. But it's, I'd offer one other point of view. It'll be the bridge that Canada owns, because Canada does not own the Ambassador Bridge. So it'd be, just saying that it'd be a shame if something happened to your bridge.
That sounds very mafia-like. I'm a little nervous.
I know. I was trying to sound like very Goodfellas, but it'd be a shame if something happened.
It's so funny. I was about to be like, oh, this is such a happy, nice place to end, but maybe it's more of a realistic place for us to close out, because I think the three of us could talk all day.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying a terrorist plot or anything like that in terms of.
No.
Bureaucrats have very sharp pencils when it comes to writing up regulatory infractions.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I think we could all sit and chat, especially given today. We could talk all day, but just appreciate you joining us, giving your perspectives and insights. You have such great experience and such a depth of understanding. It's just so great to have you here with us on Canusa Street. So we would love to bring you back again. Well, thank you for being with us.
I butchered my French. Long live the relationship. It's there. It'll continue. And you guys keep doing the work that you're doing. I'm honored to be part of both your organizations.
This podcast is brought to you by the Canadian American Business Council and the Wilson Center. If you like this episode, help others find our show and give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.